Okay. Looks like we're connected. I'm going to grab the YouTube link while you guys are coming in. Just let me know that you can see me and that you can hear me. And we'll get started when you guys are ready. Excellent. People are coming in. I'm going to grab the YouTube link. Maybe. Here it is. Okay. Get shareable link. I'm adding the YouTube link into the chat, and I'm going to post it as a new post in the group. Okay. Everything seems to be working. Excellent. I have people on Facebook and on YouTube commenting. This is a good sign. So everything appears to be in working order. How is everyone? Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what you're training, what is currently on your training to-do list, and maybe tell me what your biggest challenge is when you're splitting a behavior, when you're breaking a behavior down. Which part of it is difficult for you? So let me know. Yeah, there's a comment, jumping skills lecture. There's a lot in there, and I really I wanted to see if I can expand on that in the next year or so. Dave, yes, when you're on YouTube, I can see your names. All right, so people are working on errorless target training for running contacts. UKI stay at home. I want to find the time to at least look into the trialing at home stuff. I think it's a really cool thing. And I think that could be a really cool transition from like training classes, but before a trial with maybe a green dog. I think that's really great. Leg weaves, putting away toys. Hi, Marianne. Marianne is training station and standby. Oh, that's right. You had a foot surgery, I think. I hope that went well. We're training running dog walks, weave entries. Thank you. Lily, you said you loved the jumping skills workshop. Thank you. Someone's working on taking turns. I clicked on the Facebook video and it automatically took you to YouTube. Huh. Cool. No idea why, but cool. I think the consensus is that YouTube might actually work better than Facebook, so hopefully. Working with a dog that doesn't weave yet, so speed stakes only. That I think, see, that's a great idea. You don't, even when I don't know, even when in-person trials are kind of a thing and more normal again, I could still see the at-home trials being really popular and really valuable. So I hope they stick around for a long time. Someone's training the slow down cue from the jumping workshop. Excellent. And if you're debating about signing up for the Weave workshop, let me know what in particular you're looking for, and I can tell you if it's in there or not. Cool. All right. So you're all working on something. So now tell me what part of finding the splits in the training, the breaking the behavior down, where do you get stuck? You get stuck, Kristen, in adding distance to the target. Is that what you're saying? Because my thoughts on splitting training has to do a little bit with how many ways you know how to kind of attack the behavior. So if you own, and weefuls are a great example because there are such a variety of different ways to teach weaves. So if you only know one way of teaching weaves, then when you're problem solving, you only have one way of breaking the behavior down. You only have one way of solving the problem. So if you've only ever taught weave pulls with, say, channels, then when you run into a problem or you can't progress, maybe your only option in your head is to just open the channel a little bit. But if you also have some 2x2 training, you might just use fewer poles. So there could be more creative splitting when you have more ways of training the thing. So I think let's talk about, Kristen said, adding distance to the target. So if adding distance to the target is what I'm trying to progress, I need to focus on lowering the intensity of some other criteria. So I might make the target bigger, Kristen, right? Because what might happen if you're really focused on getting distance from the target is that if you hit a certain distance and you start seeing failures, you might go closer. But then how does that help you go further? Sometimes we can just stay at a closer distance for longer, build up reinforcement history for hitting the target, and then we can add that distance really easily. That works a lot of times. A lot of times you can spend just more time building up your reinforcement history at a closer distance, and then the dog doesn't really matter if you're further away. So sometimes that works. But if that doesn't work, I can't just keep going closer because that's not solving the problem. So then, like I said, my go-to option would be to make the target bigger, make the target more obvious, make the target easier to hit if your position is making it too difficult. So that's one way to start looking at things, is that when you increase the intensity of one element, you need to lower the intensity of another and then combine those two things later. So I'm going to catch up on the comments real quick. Crystal, progress height movement or removing boxes so it's the full teeter. We're going to, I'll get to that. We'll talk about that. Okay. So just starting to teach the turf to weave. He needs lots of splitting. So fast and strong, he tends to just race around the outside of them. All when he does go through them, he nearly mows them down. So it sounds like you're maybe using 2x2s. So he might need some collection exercises for that. Dave says, I get stuck when something isn't going to plan and I'm not sure the problem right away. I often have to walk away and digest what happened. I think that's the perfect response when you don't know what's happening, is to just walk away. Go watch the video, think about it, come back, try it again. Because those sessions happen sometimes, and trust me, I go out with a plan. I have my list. This is how the repetition is going to go. It happened just recently with shock. It was I was progressing shock's weave poles, and I started with where I left off from the previous training session. Seems like a good idea. And she missed. Like she did the first repetition like she had never done the weave poles before. And it was the exact same. The weave poles were in the exact same position on the field. Everything was the same. And I did start on her weaker side, which maybe was uncommon. I would have to go back and check the videos, but she missed. And I thought that was weird. And when she missed, I saw some body language that I didn't like from her. So I didn't repeat that side. I immediately went to her stronger side, and she did the exact same thing. She kind of just walked right by the poles, and I broke out a little bit. And I tried one more thing, got her successful, and then she was fine. The whole rest of the session, I think she was 100%. It was so weird. So that stuff sort of just happens sometimes. But if you can't fix it really, really quickly and get back on track, then for sure, just walk away a moment. Okay. And then before I jump back up to Crystal about the teeter, you find it common for dogs to go backwards in fluency when they are learning something. I don't know if I'd call it backwards, but if distance wasn't a part of like the original picture, sure, they might go wait, because we don't necessarily know what they're learning is the cue, right? Because I know I do it. I'm right next to the target. I'm down on the ground next to the target, building value for the target. And then I'm standing up, building value for the target. Well, standing up a foot from the target is wildly different than standing 6 feet from the target or 20 feet from the target. So if you and your physical position were a part of the cue, and then you remove yourself, yeah, fluency is going to potentially go down because the cue has changed. And they have to learn that this part of the cue, your physical position, can change. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're gonna hop back up to Crystal. So when we're thinking about building up to a full height teeter, I love training teeters. I think of it like this, especially with a dog who we're basing when to move on kind of confident and fast as the criterion. And that can be really difficult when we are using that as a criteria. It was very, very common that if you went out and you did a training session and it was 80% correct, so 8 out of 10 responses from the dog was correct, that was your green light to progress it. And that's how I was taught to train dogs, is you got 80% fluency, correctness, I don't know. You got 80% success in a training session, make it harder next time. And I think we now know a little bit better, because yeah, sure, the dog could be getting it 10 out of 10, but they're walking across it or they're miserable. I mean, I've worked with dogs, especially on the teeter, like labs and gold retrievers. They're wagging their tails because they're generally just happy dogs, but they're terrified of the teeter, but they're doing it. They're doing the thing, but they wish they weren't doing the thing. So when we add in speed or confidence, which is a little bit harder to measure than they did it or they didn't, I kind of like to think of it, and this is what I'm doing with Gletta, the icy pup that I'm training, is that I know what her fastest looks like because I've seen her running in the forest with the other dogs. I've seen her running around the yard after a bunny. I know what her like top arousal level is. We'll call that a 10. I know what her 10 is. I'm very well aware that I'm probably not going to get a 10 out of her in the context of agility. So it's not my goal necessarily, because it's not going to be, agility is not going to be a level 10 motivator for this dog. So I shoot for like a 7 or an 8. And she usually starts, when she's learning something, at a 2 at the best. I mean, it can be pretty painful to watch her sometimes because she starts at a 2. And I don't want to make it harder when she's, even if she's correct 100% of the time. I try not to make it more difficult when she's still functioning at a level 2 arousal level. I kind of stay at that same level until I start to see her creep up a little bit in arousal, while she's still being successful, of course. So I wait until I get to about that 6.5, 7, 8, and then I'm going to add in a layer of difficulty. And I especially had to do that with teeter. I had to go back and forth with her, with the teeter, in adding. So if I added my speed, I would decrease the intensity of the teeter. So I would put the prop back under the teeter, so the teeter dropped less, but I was running more. And then when I took the log out from under the teeter, I lowered my intensity. So I would flip-flop the intensity of those layers. And then when I felt like she was at a 7 or 8 on both of those individually, then I slowly combined them. And I totally, as soon as when I change things, I see it go back to like a 4 or 5. I very rarely see her go all the way back to 1, 2, 3 if the behavior is being progressed in a reasonable way. If I introduce something completely new, I see that level 2, level 3 from her. But as we progress, I can start to see those moments of 7 and 8 type things. But with the teeter in general, so that's kind of half your answer, Crystal. But with the teeter, you have height of the board. So how much is it going to drop? You have the surface underneath the board. What kind of noise is it going to make? Right? The difference between a teeter banging on grass and a teeter banging on dirt and a teeter banging on the sidewalk, all those are huge. So you have the surface in which the teeter is banging on. You can make that, you can vary that. Then you can vary your distractions. So are you moving? Are you standing still? Are you adding handling? Then you can add obstacles before and after, because sometimes an obstacle before is going to increase the arousal level. And that, so like, especially for Gletta, tunnels, she, like, same thing. When she first learned the tunnel, she was at a 2, and now she goes like an 8 with the tunnel. She really likes the tunnel. Tunnel's consistent 8. So she'll go through the tunnel in an 8, and then she'll see the teeter, and it's amazing. She drops to a 4. But eventually, she went in the tunnel at an 8, came out of the tunnel at an 8, and stayed doing the teeter at an 8. So she's very easy to observe these changes in like confidence level. But so the obstacles before can sometimes add arousal to the actual obstacle, but then obstacles after can do the same thing too, because they might rather be at that next obstacle than doing the teeter. So you have lots of variables there, and with all obstacles ultimately. And let me know if you need more of an answer, Crystal, than that. Am I making sense? Haven't seen a comment come in a while. I never know if that just means the internet has left the building, or if that just means I'm making sense. It's like my imposter syndrome. Excellent. Okay, so I kind of touched on this in the beginning. The more you know, the more ways you know how to train something, the more creative you'll be with your splitting. You guys are great. Perfect. So that's kind of where I would start, is even if you're not going to train the behavior a certain way, learn about it. Thank you guys for reinforcing my imposter syndrome and letting me know you're still with me. So I would start there. I would start with, how are other people breaking this behavior down? And can I learn from that? I don't think I make any claims to have invented any method, but what I do believe that I am particularly good at is learning about as many methods as I can and planting seeds in there, and then maybe new things come from that. Like, I think a lot of my weave pole stuff, it feels new and different to me, but I think the ingredients in which it was formed came from other methods and seeds planted, and then new stuff comes out on the other side of that. So start there. Look for the opposite way it's trained, because not every person, so like 2-on-2 off contacts, some people use a target, some people use a nose target, some people use a foot target, some people use a rear foot target, some people don't use a target at all. They lure the behavior and they train, and they just back chain the behavior on the board itself. Some people train the position on a prop and then transfer it over. Some people, so you're going to have all these different ways of training it that none are wrong, right? So they all work, or the method wouldn't exist. So, and then because sometimes our dogs just need one piece of that other method, right? Some dogs need the concept of a moving down to be able to grasp the concept of a 2-on-2 off dog walk. But other dogs, they learn the 2-on-2 off dog walk as the concept. They don't get taught how to stop under any other circumstance, and they get it. But if you are coming at and you're training 2-on-2 off and your dog isn't getting it, I would look for a piece of some other method to see if you can add that. And and enhance the dog's understanding of the behavior. So that's like number one, is look for other ways the behavior is being broken down by other trainers and see if you can pull from that. The second thing is kind of understanding that anytime you change anything about you, you are splitting the behavior, you're changing the behavior. So you are a variable that you can play around with in your training. So just like we were talking about with Kristen in the running contact target, your position is a variable that you want to change, but split in a way that makes sense for the dog. Some dogs do really well when the handler is behind the target, and some dogs do really well when the handler is ahead of the target. So depending on your dog, you may start in one place and then slowly move to the other position, and then distance. Some dogs are just fine with it. But then, like I said, some dogs are going to need the bigger target to lower the intensity. And I only think of bigger target because I've had to train grown dogs, really, really big dogs, with the dog walk. So I had to start with a wider ramp of some sort. So for one, like getting a grown Afghan hound into a tunnel, you have to make the thing bigger. Training a full-grown Afghan hound to walk on a dog walk, I had to use a wider, I used a mat, but it was like a board. I just had to get them comfortable walking on a bigger target before I could expect them to walk on a very narrow dog walk plank. So solving that problem now makes it easy to solve, or add in a split for some dogs that might need that sort of help. And Dave, you can do it on the table, the moving down. Everyone who teaches an automatic down has them on the table, has a moving down. So teach it on the table, and it's the exact same concept as 2 on 2 off. So your handler movement and handler position are variables that you can split apart. You can be close, you can be far, you can be standing, you can be sitting, you can be standing still, you can be walking, you can be jogging, you can be running. Okay? Split your movement apart finely. Maybe you walk backwards, maybe you jog backwards, maybe you run, if you can, backwards. I don't run very fast backwards, but it's fat. I don't know. It's not as fast as forwards. But I mean, does anyone even use the table anymore? I forget. I think a lot of the organizations have gotten rid of the table, so we might not have to train the table, which means it's going to get harder for me to get people to teach a moving down if we don't have a table, but that's okay. Moving down. So your motion is such a big part of everything. Splitting that more finely when you need the dog to kind of ignore your motion is going to be where you see a lot of problems. Oh, see, I don't know. I knew there was some change with USDAA and the table, but I didn't really read what it was because it didn't apply to me at the time. I'm not very up to date on competition rules because I don't have any competitive goals at the moment. That's why I have you guys. You guys know the rules. It's good. You can also, and we talk about this probably every single live, but use your reinforcers to add layers of distractions into your training. But the same thing, if I increase the intensity of the reinforcer, I'm decreasing the intensity of the behavior. So that's something like that same session I was just talking about with Shock and her weave pulls. I was going back and forth between using food in a bowl versus toy on the ground for the same behavior, trying to get to 4 closed pulls. And I would first make sure she could do, so my goal of the session was that I could be ahead of her in the pulls and moving. And I was just going to like walk or jog. I think that was going to be my goal. But anytime I would change the intensity of me, of my motion, my position, I would first lower the intensity of the reinforcer on the ground. So I would start everything with just food in a bowl. And if that was good on both sides, then I would increase the challenge to frisbee on the ground. And then I would repeat the same thing for my distraction. Does that make sense? And then when that was good and I was going to increase the challenge of my motion again, I would lower the distraction of the reinforcer. So you can play around with those types of things as well. If your dog has a higher arousal level for toys or certain foods, you can first train, you can layer in these challenges, train the skill with a less arousing reinforcer, and then the same skill with a higher level reinforcer. Okay, because it's going to bring in some of those feelings, so it might automatically increase the speed. And if the reinforcement history is there, you shouldn't get a lot of errors. And one thing that I will say is that when you can use your reinforcers as distractions, I feel like you don't have to work as hard to go work on environmental distractions. I kind of feel like if the dog can ignore their favorite food or favorite toy, they can probably ignore a ring steward or a leash runner. I'm going to say probably because that doesn't necessarily apply to hypersocial dogs, because that's a little bit of anxiety and that's different. And I'm saying this as someone who has a dog that can ignore food and toys on the ground, but has a hard time ignoring people. Shrek is hypersocial. And it's not going to work as well for dogs that are afraid. Okay? So it's a completely different issue if you're dealing with anxiety surrounding people. But in general, if my dog can hit a weave pull entry with a bowl of food distracting him from the entry, I'm not going to be too concerned about a judge standing near the entry or a ring crew near the weave pulls. You can also put other obstacles around. I think we do the dogs a disservice sometimes by not putting in the discrimination training soon enough. Sometimes we put it in too soon, but I think we make a mistake by not doing it soon enough. And what may happen is one particular obstacle becomes the big magnet of the thing, and they can't hear any other cues when that one obstacle is in sight. So adding in other obstacle distractions fairly early is, I think, a decent idea as well. And then just a reminder, when you increase the intensity of one thing, if you proactively lower the intensity of another, your success rate is probably going to go up. You're not going to feel like you hit a wall. Okay, those are my like general tips. So now if you have an actual behavior that we need to break down more, let's talk about it. Tunnels. What do you mean, Nikki? The awkward silence. Gauging variable spacing between jumps in courses at speed. Okay. So whose speed? So that's like the first thing I would ask is, can he do it when the dog is going fast and the handler is not going fast? So I would first split out both of your motion. And if the dog can't go fast on their own, that's probably where I would start, because if the dog is relying on the handler going fast for them to go fast, it means that they're probably too handler focused, which is why they can't gauge things at speed. And then, sorry, I want to go back. There we are. So then, sorry, okay, I'm here now. Okay, so dog can go fast on their own. So dog can gauge the variables in spacing at his own speed. Then the dog can gauge, he's going fast, handler is walking. He's going fast, handler is jogging. He's going fast, handler is running. And then as far as the spacing goes, I would start at distances where he's very successful, and then I would change the variables of the spacing every single repetition. I don't do a lot of like set grid stuff where the spacing doesn't change. If I'm doing some sort of grid-like behavior, the spacing between the jumps changes every single time. They can't I don't want them doing the same jumping pattern every single time. But those are the things that I would try. Okay. Left and right. So Which part of it, Allie, for the directionals? And I tested Shrek's, since I know we've had this conversation. He was in front of me. I was sitting on the couch. He was just kind of standing wherever. And the cone was in front of him. And if I said left, he would have to turn to the right first to wrap the cone to the left. So his left and right is the direction he's wrapping, not the direction he moves in. So he had no problem. If the cone was behind his right shoulder, he would move to the right to wrap the cone to the left. I know that's not your question, but I know it's something we discussed. Okay, so Micah sees a tunnel no matter where it is and just has to go in it. Okay, so then let's break that down into what do we want him to do when he sees a tunnel? Because not going in it isn't a behavior. So like potentially where I might start is the tunnel 10 feet away. He's on a leash. Can he offer eye contact? Offer it, not cue it. And if he does, then I would let him go into the tunnel. Then can he do simple behaviors with the tunnel 10 feet away? If he can, let him go into the tunnel. And then closer and closer and closer, still on leash, so that you can manage the situation. And then I would start over without the leash on, or the leash on the ground, like him just dragging the leash, not in your hand. So you don't really have, you're not technically in control, but he still has the leash on. So he might have that feeling of, okay, I can't get to the tunnel. And remember, like, the first rule of fixing something is that it cannot continue to happen. So if you can't control his access to the tunnel can't be around. Tunnel has to go bye-bye. Because every time he grabs it off cue, that's one more, quarter in that jar. So it's going to take some management too. Splitting luring, so the dog actually pushes into your hand instead of just taking the food and backing off the lure to chew. Kira, I'm going to have to think about this because I don't know. Okay, so 1, does your dog chew food like that normally? Like, take a long time? Because I think mine I don't know if they even chew it, they just swallow it. So if that's the case, I would lure with something he can lick. So lure with one of those like licky sticks. It's like the little ball of stuff that they just lick and the ball moves to get stuff, or a squeeze food so that they're not chewing. They just swallow. It just goes down the hatch and they want to keep coming after it. So I think that's how I would solve it. But I would ask myself, like, why does the dog want to back off to chew a lot? Is that just how he chews? That sort of thing? Or is it like the pressure of the lure that he wants to get away from? Left training it until last. So Jumps had a lot of money in the bank before I even bought a tunnel and didn't reward them much after the first couple of goes. Yeah, I mean, some dogs just really like tunnels. I raised both Smack and Shock like very, very clearly. Do not, like, you will be rewarded for not taking a tunnel. I did that a ton. And Smack, I probably needed to not do so much of that because I actually went through struggles of refusals in front of tunnels. And Shock, I raised her the exact same way. And she just really, really likes tunnels. It's very easy to get her into a tunnel. She'll very easily take a tunnel off cue. So it just happens sometimes. I don't think we make dogs into tunnel suckers. And I don't think, I mean, of course we can, but I don't think anyone does on purpose. Some dogs just really do enjoy it. So just teach them that not taking the tunnel is super reinforcing. Um, and I think you'll balance it out. Okay, going left or right, moving forward, not wrapping, trying to go to a target at each direction. Okay, that's right. We're not wrapping, we're just turning left or right. So those splits, I would try to make sure that your position isn't cueing one or the other. So I might get one really, really strong, make sure she can turn left no matter where you are. Then I would make sure that she can turn right no matter where you are. And then I would be on her left, be on her left and ask for both left and right and alternate. And then be on her right and ask for both left and right. He mostly just swallows it, tried a lick thing, and he did the same thing. Licks for a few licks and then back off. Okay, so then you have to release him a little bit sooner. So it might be that you have to build the duration for the staying on the lure like we build duration for anything else. Or will he come from a far way? Even if you're not, can it be more like a target? And so does he have that concept? Does he have like a sticky target behavior? Can he stay on something that isn't food and move? So that's one concept that you might teach, and then he can learn to do the same thing. Well, then you don't even need a lure. If you have a sticky target, then you can just use sticky target and then reinforce sticky target for everything. You can use a sticky target as the lure. So those are some options. Or build duration like any other behavior. If he holds on the lure for a second, he gets it and he gets released off of it. So then the other thing is, are you cueing, or do you have a cue for you can stop luring now? So that's what I might try, is let him know when food will no longer be coming, because he might just be checking, like, is there really more? And he comes back. I'm guessing, obviously, because I don't have a video or anything, but let me know what you think of those things. Okay, so gets one direction really well, starts freezing as soon as I move to 2 targets. Okay, so what if you still use 1 target but change her orientation to the target so that the direction is different? So there's not like a discrimination between targets, it's just a discrimination for her. Turn left, turn right. Yeah. Anyone got any other things we need to split? I can answer a couple more. We'll wrap things up. Yeah, mostly, Allie, you would just have to move her. So if she's like facing the wall and there's a target to her left, then for the next rep, you just need to put her to the left of the target so that she has to turn right. So you would just have to move her and move the setup every time. It's very loud. All right, I'll give you guys a couple more minutes for last questions or things that you think you want to split apart. But let's go over things one more time. Your first line of defense is to look for other ways of training the behavior and seeing if you can use steps in some other training method to enhance the training method you're currently using. This is preferred to scrapping what you're doing and starting over with a completely new method. I think that's dangerous. Okay, so don't go changing methods every 3 weeks. Just go see what you can learn from those other methods to enhance your own training. 2 is make sure that you're splitting your movement and your position really finely, because we don't always know how our movement and position is affecting the dog's understanding of the cue. When you can use your reinforcers as a distraction or as a way to add arousal, you can look for splits within those. So shock, for instance, I usually start with kibble, which she barely shows up for. I mean, it's hardly a reinforcer for her. Then a meatball, because, I mean, at least she's like, all right, that's at least a snack. I could probably up it to raw food, but I'm not likely to do that with her. She doesn't need it. And then a tug toy, and then a frisbee. I could probably go up another from a frisbee to a ball, but I don't know if I want to. So I can layer in different arousal levels and different distractions, because the higher arousal level the reinforcer causes, the more she wants it. Like ball and rope, super high stakes, or just a ball, super high stakes. So she's going to want it, probably more than she's going to want to weave. So if she can weave to earn the high stakes item, I'm not as worried about environmental distractions pulling her off task. That doesn't count for dogs that have some anxiety surrounding environmental distractions. That's a different conversation for a different day. And then other obstacles. You got to throw the discriminations into their training a little bit sooner than we have been. Don't wait until you're running courses to give your dog those choices. And it will allow you to assess which obstacle has more reinforcement history behind it and which ones need more. I want to avoid one obstacle holding more value than others. I want to at least try to avoid that. Okay, and then when you increase the intensity of one thing, lower the intensity of another. And then when those are very successful, very confident, very fluent, then you can combine those two things. Okay, but there's always something you can be changing about the training. And of course, the more data you have, the more you know what to change and when to change it. But try not to only rely on like an 80% success rate before moving on. You want to look for, is the dog confident? Is the dog moving at the, so you can, if you can observe what you feel is confident and fast, you can make it measurable. But then when you're talking about it with someone else, you need to define it more clearly. Okay? All right, you guys. Any last moments of questions? If so, drop them in there quickly. Otherwise, we will do this again next Monday. And I don't know what we're talking about, but maybe, I don't know, I'll figure it out. I'll put it in a poll. We'll decide what to talk about, but we'll be here again next week. Awesome. Thank you for sharing your evening with me. I hope you guys are all doing well, and happy training. And don't forget, you can share your training in the group. You can ask questions in the group. And if you're looking for ideas about other methods, I'm sure, you know, there's a lot of you in the group. So I'm sure we haven't. It's a dinosaur, Allie. We talked about this last week. It's a dinosaur. I don't know what I was saying. Anyways, with so many people in the group, I'm sure not everyone has trained everything the exact same way, so you'll be able to find lots of new ideas. Accidental failures, accidental, doesn't matter, like, give them a cookie anyway. I mean, it's no big deal. In a lot of situations, I reward a failure anyway, so just reward them and move on. No big deal. That training session I described with Shock, where she got the first 2 repetitions wrong, she got rewarded both times because she ran right through the middle of the poles without weaving and ate the kibble from the bowl. So she got rewarded twice in a row for doing the wrong thing. I don't know why she did those things, but on the 3rd rep, she was successful. And then for the rest of the 3-minute session, she didn't miss another one. So I don't know. Reward them and move on. Allie didn't get to meet the dinosaur last week. So he's a dinosaur. And they also met Toothless last week. He sits on my desk next to my magic wand and my key to success. All my magical items that don't help me sit on my desk. Cool. Okay. That's it for this evening. Thank you guys, and I will see you next week.